start for this class today?
Can I start?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, sure. You can start this session today.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, my title is cultural diplomacy, harnessing the power of the country culture for international collaboration and economic growth. Sorry for the interruption. Sorry, I am Meseret Worku from Debre Tabor University, History and Heritage Management Department, and I am a director of Aleqa Gebre Cultural Study Directorate. You are hearing me?
Yes.
Oh, shall I continue?
Sure.
Oh, thank you. As an outline for this discussion, the W occupations I can raise here, as outline, what is, that means define terms by starting define terms. What is culture? What is diplomacy? What is cultural diplomacy itself? Another, what is soft power? That is a point related to cultural diplomacy. Another W question I raise to present my class related with the cultural diplomacy, its role for economic development. When cultural diplomacy is was started, and at what level today we can locate cultural diplomacy. Another point I will raise, why or the importance or the pillars of cultural diplomacy. How or what are the tools for cultural diplomacy? What kind of tools we can use cultural diplomacy? By whom cultural diplomacy also performed? By whom? And the final point, what is the influence? What are the influences of cultural diplomacy uh, for economic growth or for economic development? These points will be discussed. When I start, what is culture? Culture, in terms of its concept, defined by different scholars according to their specialization. They define in different way. It is a complex concept, but general, agreed by different scholars. It encompasses groups, shared ideas, laws, customs, values, practices, social behaviors. Generally, the concept of culture, a group's shared ideas. What kind of laws groups share? What kind of customs the group share? What kind of value they have? What about the practice? The social behavior, what seems to be? It includes human civilizations like religion, art, tradition, or heritage, morality, skills, and habits. This indicates generally what culture means. When we become to another definitions, what is diplomacy? Before defining, before joining the two terms, culture and diplomacy, let us define what is diplomacy mean. Generally, diplomacy, it indicates the art and the practice, the art itself is an art. So the art and the practice conducting negotiation and dialogue between different states or different groups or different countries. So diplomacy, it refers a technique used by countries to promote their national interest. What their national interest mean? Within that diplomacy, a general term, it refers an art or a practice or a way of conducting negotiations or a dialogue between different states or country or groups or maybe individuals of different countries to promote their national interest or their group interest and related. What's the meaning? Or we already try to define separately what culture mean, what diplomacy mean. But when I join or when we join the two terms or connect culture and diplomacy, it broadly defined as the useful cultural element that cultural diplomacy means, broadly defined as the use of cultural element to engage and build relationship between countries or between groups that works as a channel or a tube for mutual respect and appreciation. Generally, cultural diplomacy, it refers by using culture or by using cultural elements, that means maybe literature, religion, maybe art or others, using this as a channel for mutual respect or for by or three or for group or for collaboration, respect and appreciation. With this, it emphasis or cultural diplomacy emphasis on people-to-people connections, country-to-country connections. Cultural diplomacy, it indicates that foster or increase or galvanize mutual understanding, improve relationships, deepen or increasing socio-cultural interactions, nature or national interests, and beyond that. So when we connect the two terms, cultural diplomacy, it engage or foster the mutual respect or connection between two countries or between groups or between people-to-people relationship. More focus on a cultural diplomacy apart to governmental relationship, apart to foreign affair relationship of any country or every country. For instance, apart to the relationship between embassies of Indonesia and the relationship between embassies of Ethiopia, cultural diplomacy, it indicates people-to-people relationship. The societal relationship, the society relationship that used to foster a mutual or cooperate understanding. It is the use of culture as an object and a means of achieving a status foreign relationship or country's foreign relationship. Fundamental goals are creating favorable or conducive or a suitable image for the two countries or one country, that finally popularizing or announce its people culture and language. So cultural diplomacy, as already I tried to introduce, it is a part to governmental or leaders relationship, a people-to-people relationship, people-to-people relationship, or societal relationship between different countries, it creating a favorable image of a country and popularize its people's culture and language. It is a type of international public relations. What is cultural diplomacy? It's a part of or a type of public relations that is understood as a form of soft power. Another meaning of another word we can to define, like already I try to define what is culture mean, what is diplomacy mean, what is cultural diplomacy mean. It is a type of international public relations that is understood as a form of soft power in the global system that today already exercised. What does soft power mean? Before going to see, discuss, or I reflect another points, so we need to define what soft power means. In cultural diplomacy, one of the basic term is soft power. It refers to nations' ability to shape preferences through attraction rather than coercion. The basic term for cultural diplomacy is a soft power. Soft power. Not, no, we cannot use a hard power rather than a soft power. So, a soft power to nations' ability to shape preference through attraction. For cultural diplomacy, for attraction rather than coercion. That means through peaceful way, or through negotiation rather than through forceful. Our soft power explore the potential to attract people and get on board. Attract people, not force. Attract people. Or soft power, it indicates through status sanitizing their foreign policy in conjunction with universal cultural norm, based on universal cultural norm. Often soft power, it focus on culture, political values, and foreign policies. That means apart to or different from hard power, where we can use for cultural diplomacy. The opposite of soft power, I can to define hard power. It is a country's optimized effort to safeguard their independence. It's a non-state organizations what use violent means to get what they want. It refers a hard power. In cultural diplomacy, soft power is basic than hard power. We use or we choose soft power. Hello? You are hearing me? Cultural diplomacy can be traced to be, or I want to know when cultural diplomacy also started. When cultural diplomacy started. Historically, cultural diplomacy, it started related with nations have utilized a cultural element for ancient periods. Through art, literature, music, heritage, to communicate shared value and traditions, laying a groundwork for diplomatic cooperation or peaceful relationship. So when we define when cultural diplomacy started in human history, it's also started in an ancient period. The concept not a recent phenomenon. Rather, historically, human beings or nations have utilized cultural elements in art, literature, music, heritage to share their values. For instance, in ancient Greeks, in ancient Rome, ancient Chinese, or Southeast Asia, including Indonesia, in Africa, during ancient Ethiopia, we can raise for ancient period when we raise a point when it was started. The emergence of cultural diplomacy as distinct field, it gained momentum basically after Second World War. That means after as you know, Second World War, it was took place, or it was fought between Axis powers and Allied powers between 1939 and 1945. So the concept of cultural diplomacy emerges as a distinct field. Especially, it was in terms of history, it goes back to as old as the beginning of human beings, the art of writing or literature, music, heritage. But as a distinct field, it was started after World War, after World War II. During this period, during the World War II or after World War II, the West political, economic, cultural nationalism become disgraced. As you know, one of the cause or the factor or the basic factor for the World War II was nationalism. So after Second World War, the West's nationalism became discredited or minimized. The devastation of nationalism by the West promoted re-evaluation of diplomatic strategy. When they leave nationalism, they introduce a diplomatic strategy, leading nations to recognize the need for more nuanced approaches to international relations. That means the West, basically under the leadership during the Second World War and after World War, by two groups, one under the United States of America or USA, another under United Socialist Soviet Russia or USSR, by forgetting or minimizing before World War II, the nationalism idea, they shift into international relation that goes or play as a base for the beginning of international diplomacy during the mid of 20th century. Cultural diplomacy, with its emphasis on people-to-people connection, emerged as a complementary tool or an instrument to traditional statecraft. Another point play for the rise of cultural diplomacy was during the age of Cold War, after World War II. The Cold War cultural diplomacy plays a significant role as nations sought to showcase their cultural achievements, values to the world. They focus on this. For instance, during the Cold War, like during World War II, the world also divided into two groups under the leadership of two countries. For instance, during the Cold War, the USA and the USSR, or the United States of America and the United Socialist Soviet Russia, engaged in a cultural competition that triggered cultural diplomacy in the world as a new concept, but it has rooted in an ancient time. But as a field, they engaged a cultural competitions through art exhibitions, educational exchange, through cultural performance to project their respective ideologies. That means the West capitalist ideology under USA and the East blocks under USSR. They try to introduce the socialist ideology. They gain influence. Both the USA and the USSR compete culturally through art exhibition, through educational exchange, through cultural performances to project their respective ideologies and to put or to gain their influence over one another, to collect or to gain the countries of the world on their side. The period also, the Cold War period after the Second World War, marked a turning point in the perception of cultural diplomacy. Its potential to influence not only hearts and minds of human beings, or not only influence hearts and minds of the people of the two groups, USA and USSR, rather policy decisions and international alliance. In recent decade, apart to Cold War period, the concept of soft power through cultural diplomacy has emphasized significance of cultural diplomacy. Cultural diplomacy as a primary tool for projecting soft power. That means the power of attracting. It has become integral to a nation's diplomatic toolkit. Countries strategically deploy their culture as their cultural assets to enhance their global standing. In recent decade means during 21st century, the early of 21st century, or during the third millennium, or already today, we or the world exists or located. Influence international perceptions, create favorable conditions for economic engagement, for policies. Another point, we can raise the importance of cultural diplomacy. Already we define what is cultural diplomacy mean, what is culture mean, what does diplomacy mean. Now we need, why cultural diplomacy is need, why need cultural diplomacy. It occupies a pivotal role in contemporary international relations. It acting as a bridge or a link, a connection between nations. For instance, this is not for the first time, the link between Debre Tabor University and Debre Tabor University of Ethiopia and STEKOM University of Indonesia. By using technology, we play now an example of a cultural diplomacy acting as a bridge between Ethiopia and a bridge between Indonesia by using the two universities. It used to understand global cultural dynamics. What is the dynamics of the culture in the world? Not only limited. The importance of cultural diplomacy is to avoid limited in one nation or one country. Not we limited in Indonesia, not in Ethiopia. Rather, when by using cultural diplomacy, we can easily understand the global cultural dynamics. Respect for ethnic diversity. Well, the importance of, or the need, or the necessary of cultural diplomacy is to respect for ethnic diversity. Based on my review, I know the Indonesia is a diverse country, like Ethiopia, diverse in religion, diverse in ethnicity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, maybe Islam, dominant religion in Indonesia. In Ethiopia, for instance, Christianity, dominant religion, but Islam and other traditional religions also exist. So to respect the diversity, religious diversity, ethnic diversity, and cultural heritage, the heritage of Indonesia and the heritage of Ethiopia, for instance, different. So based on cultural diplomacy, or through cultural diplomacy, we can respect the heritage of Ethiopia at the same time the heritage of Indonesia. We can respect. This is one of the importance of cultural diplomacy. Another point we raise, it has been used as a diplomatic tool, a political tool, or an instrument by leaders and countries. This is among the importance of cultural diplomacy. It also important to display who they are. For instance, they are, the Russians. When we relate the culture of Russia or the culture of Japanese, the culture of the Koreans, the culture of Ethiopians, Kenyans, or others, I know or we know who they are. It used to affirm the influence of the culture and build lasting relationship. Cultural diplomacy also important as a means to build mutual understanding between nations or countries. It promotes dialogue and forge enduring relationships. It used to promote security. It can influence trust building through different relationships. For many times, we can develop trustship, confidence when we know the culture of we know the culture of others. For instance, when I know the culture of Indonesians, through cultural diplomacy, I can develop a trust. I can build trust. You can build by Ethiopians because you or individuals not representing themselves, or he or she not represent themselves, rather the country. For instance, I represent not only I am, rather Ethiopians, because through my language, maybe through my dressing culture, maybe you can represent not you alone, rather the whole Indonesians. the culture of Indonesians. It used to build broad support for economic and political goals. Cultural diplomacy also important to support economic goal of the government, the individuals, groups. Another point I wanted to raise, how cultural diplomacy perform, or what are the tools of cultural diplomacy? What are the tools? I can raise the tools. We already introduced the definition, the importance, or why cultural diplomacy. What are the tools? One is art. That means through films, dance, music, painting, sculpture. When we raise these points of the tool or how cultural diplomacy can be performed, the age of or the beginning of cultural diplomacy as old as the beginning of film, as old as the beginning of dance in human history, or as old as the beginning of music or painting or sculpture. Another through literature or writing or through educational programs, exchanges, broadcasting of news, or that means through media, television, or YouTube, or Facebook, or social media, or through gifts to nations. For instance, I would like to give a gift this for you. For instance, through this you remember me, or remember the culture of Ethiopians. Have you seen this?
Yes.
Through gifts to nations and through religious diplomacy. Not only this, by introduce or by preparing the exhibitions, cultural exhibitions, festivals, or offer the potential to showcase numerous objectives, a showcase, or through exhibitions, we can introduce or announce cultural diplomacy. Another point, through educational programs, like the relationship between STEKOM University of Indonesia and Debre Tabor University of Ethiopia. We make a relationship or cooperatively or mutually prepare a conferences or educational programs, like as a guest lecture or like as a visiting lecture. Through this, we can perform cultural diplomacy. Through language programs. For instance, the Indonesian language may be given in Ethiopia, or Ethiopian language, for instance, Amharic given in Indonesia. Through this, we can perform a cultural diplomacy. The exchange aspects ranges from scientific, artistic, and educational points. Through literature, writing. That means the establishment of library in STEKOM University, maybe Amharic language, Ethiopian language, in addition to Indonesian different languages. The books translated to a popular books by selecting and translating to Indonesian, maybe Amharic books. Amharic is an official language of Ethiopia. For instance, Salam, that means hi, peace in Amharic. By whom? Cultural diplomacy will be performed is another point. Cultural diplomacy may be performed through public sector or through private sector or through a civil society, maybe a groups, independent, non-governmental associations may link Ethiopian culture with Indonesian culture or American culture with Russian culture through private individuals in terms of culture not represent themselves, rather represent a country. For instance, Miss Novita represents not only herself or not only you, rather Indonesia. That means the whole people, the whole culture, your hairstyle, your dressing style, the same my dressing style, my culture represents Ethiopians. So that means through private sector, through civil society, through public sector, that means through governmental. So by whom the cultural diplomacy will be performed or accomplished? It can be pursued or accomplished by three wings: by the public sector, by the private sector, and by the civil society. By all of the above or one of the two, one of the three. The influence of culture, the final point I want to raise here for today's discussion, the influence of culture for economic growth, for international relations, the relationship between countries. Cultural diplomacy is used as a catalyst for economic development of a nation, a catalyst. Maybe a private sector, maybe through education or through universities, maybe through literature or art or music. Different countries can perform or can link. That linkage or cultural diplomacy used as a catalyst for economic development, for economic growth. Maybe one of the Indonesians, for instance, came in Ethiopia for visiting. When they returned to Indonesia or Jakarta, they bought different clothes from Ethiopia. At that time, they generate income. Cultural diplomacy used to generate income. For economic, this is important or tool or basic for economic development. Cultural diplomacy build trust between countries. For economic, for trade, to perform trade activities between different countries, first the need or necessary of trustship, build trustship. I need to trust you. You need to trust me before performing any activity. So cultural diplomacy is basic or important to build a trust. After trust, we can perform our economic activity or import and export. Before importing and export, the two countries or traders or leaders need to build a trustship that is played by cultural diplomacy. Trustworthy is important. For instance, I can easily send different goods and services to Indonesia because I am trust or I already build trust in university. So trustship is important for economic development, to catalyze, to galvanize economic development. Through cultural diplomacy, visitors of different countries can easily move in their or each country. For instance, the groups of visitors or adventurers come in Ethiopia from Jakarta to Addis Ababa because they already established trustship through cultural diplomacy, through education, through exhibition. This lays a ground for economic agreement. The governments can sign a memorandum of understanding after the trust also built. That's also important for investors. The Indonesian investors can easily invest in Ethiopia. Maybe they can easily invest in Ethiopia after they establish trustship, after they know the need of or the necessary or what the people of Ethiopia also want. The investors of Ethiopians, for instance, can invest in Indonesia, their economy, after they know the people of or the interest of Indonesia through cultural diplomacy. Maybe produce Ethiopian clothes in Indonesia, then export. Maybe Indonesian cultural dresses also produced in Ethiopia and exports again into Indonesia from Ethiopia. So this is the economic importance of cultural diplomacy. That is important to generate income. For instance, you can see this video.
The boys get more that's bread freshly baked for the occasion each house. Known as Buhe, the festival has its origins in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. It marks the transfiguration of Jesus on Mount Tabor. I started participating in Buhe when I was 14. I get very excited when the time for Buhe comes around because it is the commemoration of Jesus appearing in a supernatural light. Buhe is also a tradition where young people are reminded to value older generation. The songs are written and performed in praise of adult elders. But over time, the tradition of Buhe has struggled to stay alive, especially in urban locations like Addis Ababa. It's still undergoing its own transformation, but churches are trying to revive the celebration to its own glory. The new generation has the responsibility of learning and continuing the traditions of its fathers as we age. It has the responsibility of upholding national tradition instead of following foreign traditions. Buhe also marks the last days of the rainy season. Religious leaders and Orthodox faithful take the time to give thanks and pray for a good harvest. They also take time to reflect on the biblical significance of the events. We light a bonfire to represent the light that was illuminating when Christ appeared. The bread signifies the fact that mothers took bread to their shepherd boy.
Sorry, wait me. One point that show the Indonesian culture. Not this, another I have with me.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, what happened?
Wait a moment, one video that show Indonesian culture I will present here.
Hey.
Have you seen?
Yes.
Oh, this is Indonesian culture, for instance.
For thousands of years, people have cherished many wonders of these enchanted islands, inspiring histories of the land below the wind. Astounding relics from prehistoric times are testament to the wondrous age-old cultures. Here, fascinating indigenous folklores live through the tens of time, emphasizing the resilience of local creativity and magnificent divine temples adorn the landscape as if for an exhibition of pervasive spirituality. Religion has always been the cornerstone of life since ancient times. Indigenous wisdoms are traditionally practiced in pursuance of living in harmony with nature, filling the hearts of both hosts and visitors. Funeral rites is a festivity as much as it is a celebration to modern times, resulting in popular tourist attraction. Where various cultures have crossed paths for many centuries. Impressive variety of numerous ancestors. History of Indonesia's beauty diversity. Cultural history of uniforms.
Okay, the two videos also show the culture of Ethiopia and the culture of Indonesia. That important for cultural diplomacy, for economic development. Generally, this all about for today's lesson. If you have questions, you are welcome.
Okay, thank you so much for Mr. Meseret. And for all participants, if you have any question for the speaker, please add them to the chat or you can raise your hand. And right now we have 3 questions from students, sure, already read in the room chat.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is invisible for you.
No. And
Okay.
the chatting box?
Yes.
Okay.
Already,
Let
sir.
us, yes, let us, I read this one.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Oh, what strategies can countries employ to effectively harness the power of their cultural heritage for international collaborations? Maybe this is one question. Yes,
Yeah.
Novita.
Yes.
Yes. The strategies will be one, conferences, universities, through universities conferences, or through museum, or through preparing exhibitions. One day I will invite Novita and her colleague in Debre Tabor University, Ethiopia. So we can harnessing the cultural diplomacy through literature, through meetings, different meetings, Zoom meetings, by using technology. For instance, we can easily understand the culture of Ethiopia and the culture of Indonesians, or between the cultures of different countries. So, using the modern technology, plan and provide strategies for this through education, music, preparing a festival, music festival maybe, and others. Through this, we can through such kind of strategies, we can harnessing or increasing cultural diplomacy, and later that lead to result for cultural or economic development. Another question is, what strategies can countries employ to effectively harness the power? This is the first question.
Second question.
Okay. First of all, the countries need to establish a cultural diplomatic center or cultural heritage institutions or technological institutions. For instance, during the time of Corona, people is difficult to move here and there or from one place to another place. At that time, Zoom meeting, thanks to Corona, Zoom meeting is a basic tool, more announced by individuals. Through this, by using technologies, for instance, YouTube, Facebook, or others, we can easily announce or we can play cultural diplomacy. So the government should work on technology, modern their technology, and preserve. They provide a means or a mechanisms to preserve their culture, their language, develop their language. It is clear or not?
Yes.
I am waiting another question.
From the third question from Mr. Rosisho, in what ways can country?
Eh?
Okay, just one please.
Linda, from where?
From Indonesia.
From where? From Indonesia. From Indonesia. From where? From Indonesia. From where? 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 From
Okay, we have question again from Miss Inaya. Sure.
From Asia? From Asia?
Inaya, what specific approach? Already in the room chat.
Please, Linda, ask me. I'm waiting you ask me.
Maybe you can answer a question from Miss Inaya. Sure. What specific approach?
You are hear me, Novita?
Yes.
Where is Linda?
I think he don't have questions, sir. Okay. Before I will close this event, sure. I think we don't have no more question again
Okay.
from
Oh, enough. What
yeah.
specific what specific approaches can countries adopt to harness the power of their cultural identity as a means of enhancing international relations and fueling economic growth through cultural diplomacy? Oh, good. Well, as a specific approach, the basically universities can play through universities through preparing international conferences, cultural conferences, preparing cultural conferences, collaborate between the different countries. Maybe between Ethiopia and Indonesia, or Ethiopia and Indonesia can prepare cultural festival conferences yearly or annually. Conference can prepare so a program through 6 months or through annually. Countries need to prepare the cultural festivals, and another modernize the traditional culture to by using technology. Another strategy is the government pay attention and provide budgets for cultural diplomacy, provide budget, and initiate investors or initiate a mechanisms or set rules and regulations that maybe initiate investors to invest on culture. And for increasing or galvanizing the cultural diplomacy. Basically, the universities play a great role for cultural diplomacy. Conference, the basic one, cultural conferences. Novita, it is clear? Are you
Yes,
hearing
sir.
me?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I think it's very clear answer from Professor. Okay, before I close this event, for our participant, please open your camera. I will take a picture on the count of 3. Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Only 3?
Okay, another one. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Thank you for your cooperation. Finally, we come to the end of visiting lecture today. We would like to thank you for Mr. Meseret, Worku, for the wonderful information and sharing your knowledge. We hope this information will be beneficial for our participants. At least we hope to have more collaboration in the future with Debre Tabor University, Ethiopia. The visiting lecture for today and here. We hope to see you soon. Thank you and have a nice day. Thank you so much for Mr. Meseret.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you and goodbye.